Hello and welcome to another modelling video. This is Alan from the Makana Man at YouTube with another model video. Today, unboxing, building and reviewing the 1144 Bandai Acguy no grade glue together kit. Original tooling from 1981 with the box art and plastic quality, maybe reissued in the 90s, 2000 or 2010. The box contains two brown polystyrene runners that are injection molded, very small monochromatic isometric hand drafted instructions, cluttered with a lot of Japanese and coloured reference picture for painting. Of the time, the kit maintained its original price point of 300 yen. If you're new to the channel and hobby, this is not your typical new graded Gunpla kit and requires a completely different set of skills to complete and even polish up to look good, such as cleaning up nubs, gluing and cementing together, removing and filling seam lines. Not hard but different. Say you can compare it to the difference with a salaryman and a feudal period swordsman. Going back to the roots and personal interest of the channel, we're going to be exploring and finishing a vintage kit the old-fashioned way. The era was experimental and no two kits were similar depending on its build. This example had very unique fins on the ball joints that would slot in the inner part of the limbs, and the sockets would be glued around them with a washer sleeve plopping on top. The instructions were not clear, but with a bit of test fitting and playing around got the hang of it. The first 4 steps focused on the limbs, which is pretty much half of the kit. The most notable aspect is the exposed claw, which can retract as a gimmick. I chose to glue it in to match the other side as it was a bit ridiculous. For me, the building stage is not necessarily quick, but it takes a large span of time as you can only glue one component together, fill it and sand it days after being fully cured and dried, and you'd segment another piece of limb or part over that and keep repeating the process 3 to 4 times to do a whole limb and then attach the torso. It can be tedious and promote project abandonment or even burnout. The trend of the time, just messingly gluing it together and painting it facing the repercussions of ugly seams and other obvious faults, as it was still targeted to kids and casuals due to its low price point, all without polycaps. With the limbs done, they would all slot in their corresponding holes into the torso, with care taken the right parts gluing in the right points, including the 2 halves for the legs and other bits. A mistake can be costly and permanently stuck like that. The shell is sandwiched, all the very awkward detailed seams filled and sanded, with a few details glued in like the snout, thrusters and hatch. Next stage, we are spraying the entire kit with automotive filler primer via a 0.5mm Gallia airbrush with hardware lacquer thinner. However, the building stage has not quite concluded, and this is purely to check for imperfections, as there's a lot of that can go wrong depending on the finish I choose to achieve. There was a few scratches from sanding all the parts to be less glossy, and the putty for some of the seams have collapsed and shrunk, requiring to be re-puttied. Plus, to prevent loss of detail, all the panels were re-scribed. After the putty cleaned up and all surfaces sanded to achieve a better adhesion, it was re-primed the second time, sometimes a third. Interestingly, with the complexity of the articulation points kit, it's not very articulated and has terrible balancing and posing ability. Considering the vintage and the proportions, very charming. There is a love among vintage kit builders and collectors in these shortcomings and overcoming them. Being all in one part, painting is another big challenge, and I want to make it harder by doing gradient shading. I chose small areas and raised ones which would be easier to mask, and painted the back blue plus the claws. 24 hours drying and then all masked with Tamiya tape. There are inherent risks in lifting the paint and bleed, but I've overcome this with sanding, good primer, and the choice of lacquer paint. The key is the maximum amount of time waiting for everything to dry. Moving to the main base coating of the kit, it does not have a lot of detail and need to be a little strategic in creating definition. First, I appreciated black lines everywhere for a bit of an outline. It separates components, and if there is any bleed under the tape, it's going to be black. For the sand and brown, they were free tones of shading, so it just wouldn't look like a flat turd. Brown subject matters such as vehicles, skin tones, and even robots are very hard to get right to suggest the right material and scale. Breaking it up into multiple colors or even camouflage for shading makes this job a lot easier. The shading went down like cascading light gradient, starting with very dark tones and the lighter points gradually getting lighter and lighter. The sand areas such as the belly of the robot and some of the limbs were masked off, again being raised and easily taped up. Max amount of drying and chemical hardening time was allotted. Then the dark brown, promoting a lot of red. The tones came out just right and pretty much a nod to the original reference material. After all that, the most stressful time, lifting the masking, and the finish is pretty much perfect. Mixing Tamiya accent color with gum turpentine, did a sludge wash to pick up all the panel detail and more definition. A dollop of PVA glue on the mono eye with a sticky back reflective gem for camera lens effect, and the two PVA glued on as well. Finishing everything off with multiple coats of clear gloss for that wet aquatic mobile suit look. First with a quick drying automotive lacquer for strength and scratch resistance. Polished, then multiple coats of slow drying floor cleaner cut with alcohol for a very deep sheen, such as long life and future floor, two with different advantages. All these risky maneuvers of polishing, sanding, seam lines and masking has paid off with a flawless sheen of no faults or seams coming through. This much older model that probably hasn't seen much media attention outside of a competition or magazine in quite a few decades. I honestly had a lot of fun besides the challenge and design flaws at the start, and very proud of the finish that I've achieved. Happy to display, post it around and keep it in my collection. I also plan on doing a lot more of these in the distant and very near future. In both the Japanese and English language, there are thriving vintage anime and mecha modeling groups online, to the point where these subject matters are regularly re-released by Bandai and even other brands covering Zoids and Macross, sometimes keeping their charming proportions and detail, modernizing them with extra functions like greater articulation and even LEDs, detail, resin and more. I hope this was informative on this aspect of the hobby and a different take from my past videos on other vintage builds at different stages of my skills, abilities and thoughts on the hobby. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, until next time, stay tuned for further content. Please check out the description section for references and social media links, and we'll catch you guys next time. See you later.